Hi, I'm Dan Kuecker, and in this episode, Nic Sanker and I are going to talk about transitions. In the one instance, we talk about transitions with a professional career, leaving high school, going to college, leaving college, going to that first, second job. For me, it was going into the military, while in the military, going to a deployed setting, and then coming back and trying to integrate back into my family and my network within the relationships I had. We also talk about transitions within the family environment, the transition of getting married, of having kids, losing a parent. And so all these transitions are so impactful for one's life. And so we just kind of talked through, Nic and I did, with some of the transitions he had and the transitions that I have and the lessons I've learned, and just try to share it for others to take as a seed that might help you all later.
Dan, you've been transitioning in all kinds of areas of your life, from marriage, in and out of the military, into entrepreneurship. What are the biggest lessons that you've gotten out of all these transitions over the years?
Yeah, I guess finding a little humor is through a lot of these transitions you develop wisdom, and with wisdom is showcased through gray or silvering hair. And I have plenty of that because I've gone through a lot of transitions over the decades now. Each one's different, and so you kind of got to peel back the onion on each one to see how you've really learned and improved through each phase of your life. But some constant themes, as I think bit through, marriage is a big step. Having your kids, a big step. Military, going into a deployed setting for a year, and everything's new. I think the first thing that jumps out is one's identity. You have to not be stuck with the identity that you had prior to. You have to really embrace the identity of that transition. And when I think of transition, just the first one most people go through is graduation. What do they call graduation? A commencement. It's a new beginning. It's a beginning of your life, going to college or going to work or wherever you're going. And that same dynamic plays out in any place. When you get married, it's a new beginning. Certainly, you have kids, it's a new beginning. Your life changes a bit. And that doesn't mean some of the habits or some of the things that you've done in the past is different. But your identity is, and you've maybe seen some of these folks who can't shed some of that identity from a prior life. They struggle in that transition, in that new life. I don't know if you've seen it a little bit, just coming from, I'm a Princeton football player, and now I am doing something a bit different. You'll always be a Princeton football player, that's part of you, but your identity now is something a bit different.
It's almost like you got to embrace that identity and really buy in while you're in that moment, but you also have to have other components to your identity. It's almost like you got, in the finance world, like diversify your portfolio. Mm-hmm. So when we're at Princeton, we're a student athlete. Mm-hmm. We have this whole part of us that's student, and all that comes with it, with extracurriculars and life outside of it, and career and vocation. Mm-hmm. But you're also an athlete, which means you're also someone who's and by athlete, it's not just football player. You're someone who takes care of your body. You're someone who plays football. You're someone who gets up early and has to be super disciplined. So it's defining those kind of identities as well.
Yeah. And you learn those traits that you develop there will stick with you in the next phases of your life. So yes, you'll transition to a professional career where you're doing one or multiple things in some instances in that professional career. And yes, getting up early and some of those things that you learn for being a successful student athlete certainly carries through, and it's important. But that identity is now, it's not what's, you're sticking your chest out and saying, I'm a Princeton football player. You're not anymore. You got to move on. And with the military, the people that struggle in retirement years are the ones who they kind of miss that identity of being important and wearing a uniform, or somebody saluting you, or doing this type of mission. For me, I transitioned, and it was easier for me than others because I really embraced my identity of other things. I was okay going to a playground with my 2-year-old and just being another dude, another dad at the playground and hanging out with wherever, because I really enjoyed and I embraced being actively present with my son during that stage. One of the reasons is because his older brother, when he was 1, 2, 3, 4 years old, I was deployed a lot. I was gone a lot. And so I really wanted to embrace this next season when I transitioned to that commencement, that retirement from the military. I wanted to embrace that. And so that's one of the reasons why it was healthier for me, because I didn't look back. I looked forward to that next step. So I think that identity piece is important.
When you were in the military, talk to me about how you did, like, what became your identity and what that looked like. You talk about there's a new identity. What does that look like when you're in the military, in that kind of time period of your life?
Yeah, so I first came in my young 20s, so it was post-college years, and I was a junior officer, and what was important for me was a bit of humility. I wanted to learn from others that had experience. I learned in an academic setting in college. I certainly learned as a student athlete like you did, and being raised the way I was raised in Minnesota, in a very rural community there. And so some of those characteristics helped me in the military, but my identity wasn't who I was in college. It was who I am right now wearing uniform. And certainly you got to get up early. When I went to basic training, it was just getting through it. It was survival. It was trying to help others, so it was, you help. One of the greatest lessons I learned in the military was you don't look out for yourself. You look out for everybody else, and then everybody else looks out for you, and you get through it just fine in that team dynamic. And that's what propels even for leadership. You have to be a really good follower of others in order to be a good leader, and the best leaders in the military really understand that. But yeah, you have to embrace what sucks about the military too. You don't have control of your life. In the end state, through punishment of a court-martial, if you rebuff the strict rigors of a military life, yes. If you fail to report a number of times, if you don't go to deployment, if you don't do certain things, yes, you have to comply. If you want to have career progression, you have to go to where the military tells you to go. So you have to give up some of that core identity to give to the greater identity of a military construct. And some people don't do well. That's why in some organizations within the military, they have psychological profiling, and they do a lot of assessing before they select you, because they can just kind of tell whether you're going to be successful in this setting, because they know what the needs are, and they can find out very quickly whether you're gonna be a good fit for that organization. And it just is who you are, who you're not. So that's one piece. And the other dynamic, I think, where folks struggle is it's family. It's not just an individual that has to be at peace with the military setting. A spouse, a mother and a father have to endure it. When I first came in as a single guy, the stressors that get put on a family, and then being a military child on a lot of different fronts. There's some challenges there. So it's outside the individual too. It hits the family setting.
Yeah, and it's interesting from an identity perspective how you have to almost, and this is especially from like a Christian background, you're taught to identify as a child of God. So you're not identifying as like whatever you want to be, but like your core identity starts under a child of God. And so that's where you get your dignity. That's where you get your value that allows you to explore these other kind of areas that you're interested in. But I think more than anything, I've found when it comes to identity, it's who you are and who you want to be rather than what you do has been super helpful for me. And so that helps me when I go through these different transitions, is that I look at what kind of person do I want to be, what kind of life do I want to live, and that doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I'm playing football or if I'm a student, or if I'm now in private equity or in entrepreneurship, it's the kind of person that puts the cart away at the grocery store. It's the kind of person that goes the extra mile, the kind of person that holds open that door. And that's an identity that transcends career or whatever stage you are. And so what would you say from that perspective of who you were shaped to be identity-wise in those earlier stages were super helpful for you as you go throughout these different transitions in your life?
Pearls of wisdom fall from your lips again, because it is, you hit a really good point of the identity piece. What is with you in helping you lead yourself through these different spots? And for me and for many, it's a strong faith that does help. A lot of people talk about faith in a foxhole in the military context, and that was some truth to me as well. You go off to Iraq, a new place, a new setting, you're not certain you're going to come back. That my faith strengthened in that setting. But it also piggybacked on some things that really were core to my belief, the way I was raised in a Christian Lutheran setting in Minnesota, and that really helped me cope with the ups and downs of life. And in a deployed setting, the roller coaster of emotions that you go through when you see traumatic things, how do you cope with that? One of the reasons I think I did well in coping with it, and I've come back in a good sense, is because I had that strong faith in all these settings where I knew that even if something bad happened in this setting, I was saved, I was going to a place that was wonderful, and everything in this world is finite. Mm-hmm. It's a fragile world. I could be walking across the street, there could be some horrific disease that hits you, and whatever those settings, you have comfort and contentment with where you are. And so I think that's really important. And then some of the things I'm even trying to stress with my kids and raising them is what you brought up. What are those identities of who you are, being a selfless servant, putting yourself behind others, eating last, those types of lessons. You're putting God, your faith first, putting others second, and putting yourself third. Those are lessons that kids can learn at a young age that will stick with them and give them success later. And now raising a teenager and a 7-year-old, some of those lessons are coming back, and seeing them firsthand as a parent has been fun. Yeah,
no, and we've touched on these overall transitions and lessons between lots of different stages, but let's go back to the military. There's obviously going initially into the military, there's deployment in and out while in the military, and then there's leaving the military. Mm-hmm. What is, I mean, a lot of people have seen American Sniper, and they see how difficult that transition is when soldiers come back and forth, leaving the country and going from a battlefield to civilian life. What were some of the things that helped you with that transition, and was that accurate? What's it really like to go back and forth into the civilian world?
Yeah, just like any movie or any book, there's Hollywood-ing of it, but there's a lot of truths that came through that movie, as they do a lot of movies, and things rush back. I guess a couple of things. When deployed, you have to really, you look at the people that you're with. I'm just thinking through the different generations of, because it's not just me. I served with one little person in a greater context, and I served with true people that did amazing, heroic things, and that can kind of go, whew, and all these memories kind of rush back at with you. But I also look at the other generations of warfighters that I've been able to talk to over the years, other veterans of World War II, of Korea, of Vietnam, and how we've everyone's a bit different. For us, it's been a long slog of this war on terror. It's you go over for 12 months and you come back, but you never really disengage. You have buddies that are still over there. You know you're going to be going back over there at one point, so you come back, but you're still thinking about what's there, and then you go back again, and you're never at solid footing. In the Vietnam era, it was a bit different, but the stereotype of it is units are over there fighting, and a draftee, whoever goes over for a year, and they're counting their days, and then they come back and they're kind of done. If you're really unfortunate, you go a second time in that setting. World War II, you go over with a unit and you stay there until the job's done.
Yeah.
And then you come back. And so you kind of think through these. So there's advantages and disadvantages of both when you think of how it impacts a brain, a soul, the ability to transition in and out. Mm-hmm. But I think some of the dynamics that were tough for us and for our families in this generation, you never disengaged. And that's where that movie kind of showcased that. Chris Kyle, when he was home, he wasn't home. And that was the struggle for his family too. Chris, I want you back. Well, part of him was forward because that's where his mind and his fight was. And when I first came back, I saw things, didn't do things like so many of our brothers did, and I would never want to, the valor of so many service members is great. But when you're in the Middle East for 2 years of your life, certainly there's challenges as you go in and out, back and forth, in and your families. The biggest thing for me was just letting go of the serious nature of warfare. When you're back here and wanting to be integrated well, you have to just kind of accept that people are going to want to go to the movies and going to want to watch silly shows, or you're going to want to go to a ball game and think about the recreational aspect of life here. And that's okay. And even though very serious things are going on back home, it was hard to disengage when you had buddies and you knew things that were going on. But when I fought through that, my transition was a lot better.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's almost like you have to teach yourself how to relax and how to not take everything serious again. And it's a very different, and not everything's life or death, almost in a sense. And was there anything that you did that helped you be able to take the world in a different kind of like more relaxed viewpoint?
Yeah, talking with people, not being afraid and being too strong to talk to a chaplain or talk to a therapist, and to kind of talk through what the struggles are. I think talking through that and reading and listening and being hungered to try to be aware of what was going on. When I first got back from my first 12-month deployment, I had some friends from my college years come out and visit me. I wasn't married at the time, single guy, and everybody was supportive. This was 2004, 2005 time frame, and it was wonderful having them there. But I just remembered that it was kind of weird and strained and distant, and these were good friends, and I just couldn't. My mind wasn't present with them. I think of spouses that come back and try to integrate into a family too, where the household was where it was before you left. A lot changed in that 12 months you were gone within yourself, but also within that household. Yeah. And that household is now functioning well. And if you come back in and say, this is the way it was, and bring it in, it just brings problems. So that's part of that integration, complicates this as well. And so I think what I learned is, one, being aware, being open to talking to others and walking through where you're at, and again with the identity of saying, I'm not deployed today. Yeah. I don't need to worry about all those things are going on. But the way information is now, it's a blessing and it's a curse, because you can't let go. You become an addict almost. You can bring your classified computer networks home, where you can jump in and see what's going on, and you have to be responsive to still what's going on. So you're kind of deployed from home in a way, But all that information about what's going on, it's addicting. You want to know. You want to know what's happening. And that's the Army. I think one of the crystallizations also is the Army's going to keep rolling along without me. It doesn't matter how good I was in my job. It doesn't matter how awesome that general is, or that Delta Force operator is, that Navy SEAL teammate is. You come back, the next person's going to step in and is going to do fine. Yeah. And if you don't, that doesn't need you to succeed. That's hard too for some folks.
Yeah, there's two big things I took away from that. One is almost the sense that when you come back, and this is something I sensed in the movie, people who come back feel like no one understands them and that no one can relate to them the same way. Like, you just don't understand, or like I can't relate the same way. And and that's why I think it's so powerful that you do communicate, like you talked about, where you can explain, like, here's how I'm feeling, here's how I'm thinking, here's how I see things, and you to be able to even just vent that out gives you the feeling that someone understands me. The second thing that you talked about is being able to step away, and you talked about kind of being able to get away from the war, and I think that's a really interesting thing, because I think that's a struggle even outside the military for a lot of people, especially when it comes to like just work in general. And especially in the entrepreneurial world, it's like separation of your career, your vocation, and your personal life. And that's such a struggle that supersedes even just this area. But it was interesting to see that, and I instantly kind of related to whenever I'm doing work, I can always just take my computer home, mm-hmm. and I can keep going. And it's hard to separate and be present with the people that I care about. And I don't know, I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think being present is a key to all this. And
it's so
being
hard.
Actively present with where you are. And,
yeah.
You know, I see it sometimes with bringing work home too, being a parent. Those kids see it. And if they see you're distracted with your phone, and you might be with them in the same room and you're talking, but if you have your notifications on, or if you're thinking, or if you're expecting an email, and they have it, those kids notice that, mm-hmm. and you're not giving them the attention they deserve. You made up just a really good point of one of the takeaways of hey, I can't open up to you because you don't understand. And there is a dynamic there, and that's at play, and complicated that I've seen, especially here in the part of Virginia where we're at right now, and some of the nonprofit work I do. There's no military installation where we're at, and so service members that come back here in a guard or reserve setting, they're not active duty coming back to a big military installation where there's a lot of people with similar experiences. They're coming back to a setting where, okay, I'll give you the weekend off, and now you've been gone 6 or 12 months from your work. It's time to get back to work again, and you're coming back to neighbors and others that really have zero understanding of what you might or may not have gone through, but at the same time, they're showered with love and appreciation. They want to help, but it's a struggle. And so what I've learned in talking with others is it's on the veteran to try to seek that out. The mission's not done. You got to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And so if that is an obstacle to you, you got to go find others. And one thing people in the military don't do very well is communicate within the different generations of veterans. And that's one of the things I'm going to work on through our nonprofit over the coming years. Is there are, especially now, the aging Vietnam population, who, God bless them, because of what they've went through and endured. Our generation of vets have been treated so much better, so I'm just forever grateful for that cohort. But in some ways, I'd like to say their service can continue, because there's a lot of this new generation of veterans who would welcome conversations out of respect with them, and those are people who will understand. Mm-hmm. They've been through a lot, and so I think there's an opportunity there for people who are struggling or just want to be calibrated a bit. You don't have to be struggling. It doesn't have to be a problem. But it just, how do I make a few tweaks to see things a little bit better? And they're out there, even in our community right now. There's Vietnam vets everywhere that I've reached out to and talked to over the last couple of years, and it's been a blessing to them and to me to have that. That's something I want to try to do more of.
Yeah. You've mentioned several resources that have helped with the transition. You mentioned talking to veterans, talking to a chaplain, talking to a counselor. If you had to wrap up that list with anything else that you think helps with the transition back into civilian life, what else would you add to that?
Yeah, I think back to that identity piece. You have to be hungry for the next stage, not be nostalgic and wanting the prior phase and more of it. It's being aware of the next phase. And even with football, people who have played football since they're 4 or 5 years old, they go through they're stars at high school, they're stars in college, they go on to play professionally or any sport or any profession. And then retirement comes, whether it's at 29 or 39 or Tom Brady, it's 84 or however old he was at the end. But people can go on. At a certain point, it comes to an end.
Yeah.
And some people are lucky enough, okay, they're going to transition into a media career where they're still with football.
Yeah.
But that's a slim minority. It's the same thing with the military, or if you come back, you got to look at the next phase and be purposeful with that next phase. And in coming back from deployment or retiring or just getting out where you're not wearing a uniform anymore, or if you're not putting the shoulder pads on anymore, that next phase, you have to find something that's giving you purpose. And so I think a lot of this, it's kind of the hope that's instilled with purpose, that if you can find that next phase that gives you that bounce of the leg that you're thinking about when you go to bed, it's giving you satisfaction at night when you put your head down on the pillow, that is what's going to help and propel you into that commencement of that next phase. And I think that's the same thing of a deployment. You got to look ahead and say, what do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? What do I want? You said it earlier, really good. It's not my actions, it's my identity. What is my being for this next phase of my life, and how am I going to cater to it? And one thing that's also been helpful for me is finding that trusted mentor that has been with you for years, and that you can call up and say, hey, this is where I'm at. What are your thoughts? And if you can do that, and find that one or two, maybe a third person, but I think one or two is plenty that will stick with you during that time. You can be really open. It's a confidential relationship. And it's been great for me. I've had the opportunity to be mentor for others, and I'm sure you have too, and you've seen it. But that is another step that is important, I think, in any transition.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think we're going to transition a little more to the family transitions. Wow, that was a great wording. We've talked a lot about the military, transitioning in and out. I want to talk a little bit about family, about marriage, kids, what those transitions look like. Obviously, one of the biggest transitions for a man is that moment when they become a partner, when they end up with their spouse. What are the biggest things that you learned as you transitioned into the role of a husband out of your era of being single?
Yeah, good question. That treatises can be written about that one, and it's a little different for everybody. But yeah, there's great transitions there. It's being committed to a significant other for a long time. It's making that step. Taking that step up a ring on the ladder of finding that spouse, that eternal spouse that's gonna work with you. And there's a lot of other transitions that are family based. Of course, with kids we talked about, but it's with your parents too. And when I lost a parent, that was significant. I lost my mom. What's that look like? That's significant too. So I think you're right in keying on, it's not just that professional career that these transitions that a lot of people talk about, but there are significant emotional, meaningful transitions that happen within that personal space.
I'm going to actually pause you right here. Backtracking to wrap up the last conversation.
Yeah.
How did you know it was time to transition out of the military and to move to this next phase of life? Yeah. And why did you choose to make that transition?
Yeah, a good question. I joke that there were about a dozen different reasons of why and when I did. But it's kind of like when you find your spouse. You just kind of know. Either there's no formula. There's no checklist that says, okay, I've done this, this, and this. Now it's time for the next stage. You just kind of know, and a lot of things come together. For me, a few different things. The war years were coming to an end, and enduring the sacrifice of a military career was fabulous. I wouldn't have changed it for the world, but it is a sacrifice, and it's a sacrifice that the individual, the service member endures, but the family endures. And so when you're deployed or you're really finding purpose through that military service, it's easier to accept the sacrifices and the selfless nature of that. War years coming to an end, you kind of see, okay, you look back, we've been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years. How much strategic success are we having? It's kind of go, there's lots of ways to serve in this world. Maybe it's time that I can have an impact in other ways in the community here. And I firmly believe that. A military is one wonderful way to serve, but there are an infinite number of ways to do that. And so the time came for that dynamic. And I could do a whole 2-hour segment on that alone. But the other piece that hit at the same time was the personal nature of my wife was a military spouse for a long time. I had one child, a second one on the way coming when I made that decision. And I just wanted to be actively present with them. I had a friend once who was being promoted to 1-star general, and in his promotion ceremony, as he was thanking so many people that played a role in his success, he thanked his one friend for teaching his son how to swing a baseball bat while he was deployed. A great servant, a great warrior, a great guy. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to outsource teaching my son how to swing a baseball bat. Now, you accept it maybe when, okay, you really believe in a deployed mission and you're going, but those years were done. And then the other thing with my family, dirty little secret of the military is there's a lot of families who are geographically separated. And so the military has a service member one place in the country or deployed, and that family unit is another place. And they make it work for the most part, but it's really trying. And as you continue on a career progression where you're required to move when the military tells you to move and where the military tells you to go, that's difficult for a spouse, and especially spouses that have their own professional career. And so that was another piece of it where we just started thinking that my parents were aging and I wanted to be a little more attuned to them. And then the last thing, again, with the kids, I just wanted to be actively present as a dad for those important teenage years, for the older one and for the others. And I just saw a future where if I wanted to stay on that same successful path in the military, I was going to be separated from them. And maybe not the extreme, maybe of somebody else helping my kid swing a baseball bat, but I wanted to be part of that and then serve in my community differently. So that's kind of the why and when I did, and I think it's worked out very well, and that transition was good for me because my identity certainly was all those things. Yeah. And as a as a servant of God, wanting to do something a bit different. So I made that twist, and it was a good move, and it's been a good transition, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about knowing when it's time to transition out of the military, but how did you know it was time to get married? Because like you're separated a lot of times, and it's gonna be tough being a military spouse, and she's got to want to do it too.
Yeah.
And how did you guys know that it was time to make that next step and go into what's probably not going to be the most comfortable kind of marriage while in the military, and move to that next phase of life?
Yeah. I think the first thing is you don't know for sure, and you gotta have faith, and you gotta say, boy, there's an adventure ahead of us, and we want to take it together. That we want to be intrepid and adventurous, and whatever life brings, this is the person I want to do it with. And you're not an individual anymore; you're doing it together. And it's there's scores of challenges that come with that.
What would you say were some of the biggest challenges?
Well, for us, it certainly was. The military context was there. It's personalized in nature. For us, it was just a few things that shoot in. It's family trips. It's your family. You're marrying into a family. We both loved each other's family, but my family was in Minnesota. Her family was in the South. We wanted to have, so it's geographic separation, a bit of a culture difference, and then we wanted to have our own family time together. And so what we found is the limited vacation time we had was going to one family, then going to another family, and then we found after a few years we never did our own vacations. And so we corrected that, but then we found ourselves, we didn't have as much time as we wanted with our families. And so I think a learning piece that when I mentor others, and what I didn't understand as the gravity of it when I made the decision going to the military and then falling in love with somebody in a different place, and it all has worked out very well. And certainly, you go with the excitement and the adventure that you're with. But I talked to somebody. If you go to college in another part of the country and fall in love, and take a job there, that has a significant impact on the next 10, 20, 30 years of your life. If you go into the military, you just got to have your eyes wide open. Or if you marry somebody but some of that you just don't really think of either. And you don't know. You're not thinking about it at the time, other than, hey, we're holding hands, I've fallen in love, and we've gone to, it's where, and we did some of it, and certainly it's worked out with us, but mentors, counselors, pastors, all of those premarital discussions, counseling is really important. And for Elise and me, we both had a strong faith. And so it wasn't just the relationship between the two of us, but we kind of talked about the triangle here, is we both looked up and had a strong faith and a strong relationship with God and with Jesus we were walking through. And so whatever challenges we had here, we helped overcome. Okay, we're going to walk through it in this context. And we kind of had that agreement early on, and we had that belief. And so marrying somebody that is aligned in that way helps you, because every marriage is going to run through challenges, and we had it too. But I don't think but for me it was, I was in my young 30s, and I had dated, but wasn't ready to have a long-term relationship yet. I still was thinking about other things, and wasn't even, in college, plenty of wonderful women, just like you did. It was just in my professional years in my 20s, but I wasn't ready. So I think part of it also isn't just the one that falls in your lap whenever it happens. Is you have to be, just like any opportunity. If you're not open for that opportunity in the business world or in any other setting, it could just fly right by you. And it could have been the perfect deal, but if you weren't open to it, it didn't happen. The same thing, I think I was open to it. And in the way Lisa and I kind of met and developed during those war years, and when we talked, we kind of fell in love through letter writing while I was deployed. And so we didn't have the distractions of dating in that sense. We just wrote a lot, and I wrote about life and death and faith and very serious things, and she was very supportive during that time. And I kind of just made sense and fell into place without even me seeking it. And so I think that was important too, that it was just, this is, you just kind of know this is, you just feel like this is the one. It's just something's different than all the others.
Yeah. It's interesting how you touched on, just like with military, the importance of identity and how that for you guys was rooted in your faith and how that common identity brought you guys together. How you also talked about earlier how your identity changes. How did your identity change for you going from single to married?
Yeah, you are a number of fronts. One, you're marrying into a family, and you have to really look outside yourself and be supportive, long-term and short-term. How are you nurturing, one, your own relationship, continuing it, but two, professionally, career-wise, how are you helping that person do that? And for me, it's also being open to recalibrate the way you look at certain things. My wife has more of an entrepreneurial spirit than I do, but I've found, partly because of her and her family, and just me being open to some change, that is my core and desire too. I just love entrepreneurship. I love risk taking. I love that first time of being responsible, my investment in my time, hiring employees, in my vision, our vision, help put food on their table. That's so different than just being an employee in the military or any other organization, and I just love that. And so I think the two of us shared that commonality, and in that sense, I was open to it, and she helped shine the light of that dynamic that's going to be the core of who I am professionally over the next 20 years now too. And that was one of the other pieces of retiring from the military. When I did, I was ready to be out of a large organization, especially when COVID hit. I was lucky to be out of it during that time. But so I think that was a piece of it. And it's just a lot of decisions that you're making and thoughts. It's just you're sitting down, and it's the same person, and you're trying to, okay, buy a house, not buy a house. Are we happy living in this area? Is it, when do we appreciate and look at kids, and what's the role of a career versus childhood, and how do we meld them? And it's not one or the other; it's both. And parenthood, excuse me. And so I think those key things are important. And I think for us also is we didn't do it enough, but as I mentor others and talk to people who have done it before. In the church setting, be in small groups. It's okay to talk to marriage counselors when there's not a problem. Talk to them about the good things and how you're cultivating each other. So I think it's also, reading the same books and talking about it. For us, when we are in a setting where we're doing Bible studies together, or we're reading the same books, or we're aligned, that's helpful, but not so much. Where we cross the line too much, where we weren't healthy, is when our entrepreneurship became our world. So there were times where our dates, nights, our dinners together, any entrepreneur knows on the early stages, it's all consuming. Yeah. And if you allow that it's one thing to be single in your 20s and be all-consuming. It's another thing to be married in your 20s or your 30s and it consume your relationship. Yeah. So that would be an unhealthy thing. So that's that's another piece I think I'd a lesson learned, and as I share with others, is you need to separate your relationship and cultivation, your relationship from the business as well.
And that seems to be a theme. That seems to be a theme today, is separating the different, like the family from career, and making space for both, and making space for both and fully pursuing both, but also making sure that they don't always compete, because you want to be fully invested. You're going to be fully invested in your family, but you also want to be fully invested in your career, whether that be the military, whether that be entrepreneurship. But when they're competing for attention at the same time, you're not going to do either one well, it seems like. And that seems to be like a big thing in terms of being present, like you talked about. But I think that gets really tricky when you have a spouse who is your business partner. So how did you make that work?
I don't know. We did it well all the time. I didn't. It's a. I had a. I was in a setting with a friend, a 3-star general who was asked a question about work-life balance in the military.
Yeah.
And this general said, I don't really accept the premise of that question, because work is life and life is work. And that's what made this general, I guess, successful, because that's what they did.
Yeah.
But that is not, for most people, and the people that take that approach, it can be much more unhealthy. And in the context of your question, if your family unit doesn't have a work-life balance, a work-family balance, if you're just on all the time, and we're going to accept it, and we're just going to be kind of a family that works all the time, or just in the sense, we're going to be a family that's just married to the military all the time. And so, no, your marriage is not married to that LLC.
Yeah.
Your marriage is not married to the Army. Your marriage is special amongst the two of you, and you really have to deliberately, intentionally cultivate that, and not assume that. And some of the things that, as I'm reflecting a bit in some of the discussions I've had with my spouse, sometimes there's an assumption when someone is a high-achieving person that, oh, they've got it and they're doing well, and I'm going to go do my things and doing it well. But we both want support. And just because she's a CEO of a business, or just because I'm off doing my things and doing it well, you have to not just talk about, the projections and the budget and who you're hiring and what the marketing strategy is and what your retention rates are. You got to talk about the person and how are you really doing, and talk through that. And as a business partner, you don't do that. And so you have to shed that.
Space to do that.
You have to have the space to do that and have the credibility. And then it can be tough if you leave a meeting where you're having a conversation about the budget. And potentially in the business world, you can have disagreements, and then you turn that off and you and do something else. That can be a real challenge and not easy. And that's why many will say, "Don't do it." Yeah. If you can, don't be in the same LLC, don't be in the same organization, and there's some wisdom to that, of where you have how well you calibrate some of that entrepreneurship within the couple, because you have to have that support, and the marriage cultivation.
Yeah, this is really interesting because it makes me think about not just work, but the way that families get so, from the athlete side, enveloped in sports and sports consumes their whole life, and that's their whole family identity, and that's all. They're just bringing kids to practice, the games. I'm thinking like a classic AAU family. And it was really interesting from our perspective, and you talked about how it seems like the people that are best, that's all they do, and they don't have rest time, and they don't, it's their whole life. But it's interesting how a lot of times the people that have the long-term success have built into their life ways to find that balance, because you can't go at 110% for 20 years. You can't. It's a lot of times like it's unsustainable. You need some kind of way, some kind of balance a lot of times. And there are a few exceptions,
Absolutely.
Of course. But growing up in our household, our mom was our balance. And we didn't do 10 sports. Growing up when we were little, we could do one sport. When we got to middle school, we could do 2 sports because it was after school at practice. Like it was simple. We didn't go travel and play on a ton of teams. And every single day, at the end of the day, we all sat at the dinner table together and always had every single meal together where everyone was there and together and eating and present with one another. No phones. Like, we're here together as a family. And we're eating, and I think a lot of times it was frustrating growing up where we weren't allowed to do as much as we wanted to do. We wanted to go be on all these sports teams. We wanted to go do this and that and go to friends' houses. But my mom would always be like the classic, my mom won't let me go hang out with friends 2 days in a row. It's like, what's so bad about that? Like, how does that hurt you? How does that make your life worse? But she really wanted to make sure that we spent quality time with one another, with our core family unit, and didn't let anything, no matter what we have going on in life, we always prioritized making sure that at the end of the day we come back and we're having that time together. And it's crazy how that has helped us. And we get a lot of like comments about the success. A lot of the kids in our family have found according to like the world, like a lot of success. And it's not because we were always working out or always doing X, Y, and Z. We weren't allowed to play on 10 sports teams. Growing up, in order to play a sport, the one sport we wanted to play, we had to play an instrument. She knew that we really wanted to play a sport. So you had to play an instrument. Jonas played piano and he played in the percussion. I played clarinet. Lucas played saxophone. And she forced us to not let anything consume our whole lives. And it's, looking back, like, I really appreciate it. And it's something that's helped us be able to sustain. Like, we don't get that classic athlete burnout the same way that everybody else who's constantly working out. And you can work hard. You should go work out a bunch. But you shouldn't let that be everything and always what you do, especially with us having 6 kids at home. You can't. You will, as a family, burn out. Because even if you're not playing in those games or in those practices, you're going and supporting. Because we always went to each other's games. Now that Elias is the youngest and he has his basketball games, we're trying to show up at many games, and that was something that was awesome. Like, you always had your family at your games. And that was one of the hardest parts going to college. I didn't have my family at all my games because I was so far away, and I had grown up with my whole family supporting me, always at every game and cheering you on. And I don't know, I just found that connection of finding balance and not overcommitting, but having that intentional time that's set aside. And she was the enforcer on that. Like, we had to have that, and there was no if and buts. Like, that's just how it was. And it doesn't make sense in the time. You're like, why do I need to do nothing? And it's that now same kind of thing where I have to, and I've done a bad job. I always keep over committing to too many things, but now I'm starting to appreciate why you need to put aside time for nothingness or just being present with the people you care about.
I love everything that you said there, yeah, because the teenager, not fair mom is real, and that's where, a mom should say, That's right. It might not be. Your friends might be doing something, but you're going to understand it, and you got to stick to that. And that's why Frau Sanker, that good German in her, of having what a blessing. What a blessing she and your dad were and are to you. But I think that's exactly right. Having a deliberate routine that emphasizes the key points, those important natures. And what you said is evening meal. I had the same thing every night, with minor exceptions. Every night we had dinner together where we could talk, enjoy, talk about the day, talk about the future. We had everything else stopped, and we did that. It was easier then. We didn't have the distractors of the phones and everything else going on. But if the more we can do that in that setting, I think it's true. And that's one of the reasons why the Sanker kids aren't successful because they're great athletes. They're successful because they're great people. And that was, you don't get that by hitting every travel program out there. You get that. And those that do it, it's fine, and it can work out for some of them. But I think the better strategy is ensuring that those kids realize the world doesn't revolve around them. You realize growing up the world didn't revolve around Nic Sanker. It revolved around the family. You were part of a bigger unit, and with your faith, with the family, you understood all that. And then, yes, you had the hunger and the work ethic to really succeed when it was your time to shine, but you also knew where you fit in to that structure. I think that's gonna, that's a great lesson and great traits to have to carry on.
Yeah. And I mean, like you talked about, just having that support. Stay-at-home moms don't get the credit that they deserve. Like, they are the glue that holds together society.
Yeah.
And everything, just like you talked about, everybody's so focused on your career, you're making money, you're playing sports, you're doing X, Y, and Z, but who's the one that checks in on, like, how you are doing? Mm-hmm. At least for me, it was always the mom. And just like when you need that after a long day, and you have a meal, and you have someone you know loves you, cares about you, and wants to be with you, and just like is there with you at the end of the day. And it's crazy how much of that mental side and having that security can help free you to do all kinds of things and be free to fail or free to chase whatever you want to chase.
Yeah, and it's I'm far from giving advice to other parents out there because there's no perfect solution. But I had some of that. When I first retired from the military, I made a deal with my wife that, hey, you've sacrificed a bunch with me being in the military. I want you to, if you need to travel, you need to do some things, I'm going to be here. And I had professional interests that I was engaged in, but I was actively present. So I almost like instead of stay-at-home parent, it's both are going to do, but it's that glue, it's that actively present parent who's just there, and the kids know it. And if it could, and there's no right or wrong to any of this, but I think as much as we can encourage that or not discourage that, it's a good thing. And certainly, I grew up in a setting where my mom was an RN, and when the kids were born, she made the decision to forego that, and she did some other work in the community, but her selfless profession was being actively present at home to help raise 3 boys. And I'm forever grateful for that, as you are with your wonderful mother.
Well, to wrap it up, I'm going to go back to our initial question. I'm going to go back to what advice. So you've been through a lot of transitions in life, becoming a married man, going in and out of the military, having a kid, losing a parent. There's so many transitions in life. What advice would you give to others about how to handle all of these transitions throughout life?
Yeah, I guess the one thing is don't do any of it alone. You don't ever want to, especially if you're challenged, and if it's grieving, with any of that, with the losing a parent or losing a child or whatever, something like can be. Don't do it alone. Two, as hard as it can be at times, you have to embrace the new identity of wherever you're going. You got to be hungry and intrepidly purposeful with whatever's coming next. You'll always be a military veteran, but that's not my identity. You'll always be a Princeton student athlete, but that's not your identity going forward. I think another thing is having a mentor, having somebody that you can lean on, not being afraid to be vulnerable, not being afraid to say I'm struggling with something, and voice it and get it out and talk through with it. If you can develop a strong faith, that's been very helpful for me, where even if I didn't have another human, I spent time in the Word, I spent time with Jesus, just kind of talking through the issue and wisdom from the good book or from others talking on different topics with that faith background. It's been wholly beneficial to me in all of these transitions, again, whether it's a professional transition or a familial transition. And I really enjoy, as much as I've missed some others, that next step has always been better than the one before. And so a number of things there to chew on and to, I think, always be learning. I think there's a piece of the lifelong learning aspect of this world, that there's always something new to learn, and having perspective on what true wealth is. I was talking to a good buddy who partnered in a law firm. He's been there a long time and has made gobs of money, and he's fulfilled by it, but that's not giving him happiness. We kind of agreed that wealth isn't money. Wealth is your health, is how much time you have to invest in on some sort of purpose. And so if you can kind of have good health, time, and purpose with whatever into the transition of what's coming next, I think that is going to pay dividends and bring joy and happiness wherever you're at.